until, not the end of the war, but until the Russian army marched into Budapest in 18th of January 1944.
And what do you remember about that?
What I remember, there was a lot of gunfires and a lot of bombs, and just my father came in early in the morning to say that the Russians are here. And in fact, he was standing outside. He was the first one to, the people in my vicinity, who heard, and we just couldn't believe it. The Russians are here.
They were completely, I'm sorry, I didn't hear what
They
you said.
didn't, they were overwhelmed. We just couldn't believe it. The Russians are here. And
so it was a feeling of
relief,
of joy and delight.
Sure,
Yeah.
yes, it was so. We are alive, and the Russians are here, and everything is over now, and we don't have to be scared anymore for our lives. And they came to save us, and that's what we believe, that they came to save the Jews' life. That's how we thought at the time.
And how did it turn out?
Well, it was all politics. They didn't come to save the Jews, they came to win the war. I mean, and they killed plenty of Jews while they were there. But we take them to them with love, and we like they were our survivors, and it's just later that we had a lot of hardship with the Russians in Hungary. There were also a lot of Jews soldiers
amongst the Russians?
Yes, they were there as well. Yeah.
And what sort of reaction did you get from them?
Well, in the beginning we were we were so elated. We never sort of analyzed anything. We just knew the Russians here, and we are free, and we are going to go. What we saw from them, that they were hungry, and what we saw from them, that they wanted to see, they took away everything from. I mean, if you had a watch, give you a watch, and they took things away from us. Some of them were drunk, and but still we looked up to them, because we are not scared of them, because they saved our lives. So we were, but they were robbing people. They were, but that was the time that everybody went out to get whatever one could, looting, and After the liberation was a very hard time. Liberation of Budapest was very hard.
So it was. I mean, you'd been through a very hard time before that. This was a different kind of hard time. You were expected to be free, and yet you
What
weren't.
happened? We were free to an extent, yes. We came out of I remember about lunchtime. We came out of this Padasutsa, from this protected house. Everybody just walked out. We wanted to find my grandmother, my grandparents, and we went to look for them in the ghetto, because there was a ghetto as well. They were taken to the ghetto. We were in this building, my grandparents and many, many other Jews were in the ghetto in Budapest. So we went to look for them. When we came out of that building and we went to the main street and we saw the city, it was burning. It was all in flames. People in the street. I was with it was very frightening. People lying, dead people lying in the street as well. And we went to look for my grandparents. We found them. And I don't know for how that my grandmother had fresh bread on the table, and we found it was such a joyous occasion. It was something, it's difficult to describe, that you are alive and you are all right and we are together again and so on. But then Pest wasn't liberated. Pest was liberated, sorry, Buda wasn't liberated. But Buda was liberated 3 weeks after. And all these 3 weeks, Budapest was bombarded. And this bombardment claimed many, many lives. So many people whom we knew just died on the street, just went out to do shopping and fall dead. It was unbelievable. It was scary and terrible. I remember going with my father in the street, and you saw, people one on top of the other, like dead people, one on top of the other. Just unbelievable it was. It was so scary, and frightening. Thinking about it all the time, it was terrible.
So this was a bombardment between the Russians in wanting to liberate Buddha.
Buddha, yeah, that's right. So there was no bridges, all the bridges have been bombed. They only went by little boats from one place to the next, from Buddha to Pest. But on the 12th of February, Buddha was capitulated, they said. And this is when new life started. But there's a terrible famine in Budapest after that, after the war. There was no food. And for no money in the world you couldn't get food.
It wasn't brought in from anywhere outside?
I don't know. You just had to make the most of it. Whether you just looting, whatever you could, just find food to survive.
What did you do?
Because there was such a famine. Well, I think my father and my uncle, or I don't know, my other uncle joined us later, who survived, my mother's brother, another one. And they went finding food. They went out and they brought something back, whatever they could put their hands on. Whether they were stealing it, whether they were, this was again the mean to survive.
So do you remember that period as a time when you were more hungry than at other times
before? It was very, very, I remember that. And also having myself something and sharing it with somebody else who had nothing, who had no one to go to loot for them. And in fact, it's so funny. And I lived in Israel, or it was after I went back for a visit. I don't remember now the precise time. I met someone and we were talking about those times, and she said, I remember that we were so hungry and you had at home bread with oil and we were eating that, and I remember you gave us that bread and oil. And I always remember you for this, we were so hungry, that was so precious. The slice of bread with the oil that we ate. But later, with my grandparents, myself and my grandparents went to live to the provinces because there was more food. And my parents stayed in Budapest. Myself and my grandparents, my grandmother and my grandfather, they took me with.
Why did you go with them rather than stay with your parents?
Because that's what they wanted. I think to find food and we went to a certain place out of in a little town or village or whatever it was, and there was in the villages there was food.
And your brother was with you too?
My brother was with my mother and my father. He stayed. Yeah.
And how long was that for that you were apart?
It was quite a long time, I think. I can't tell you. Quite a few months I was away from my parents.
And did you get to see them?
No, I didn't. No, at that time, no. But then I even remember going to school when I was with my grandparents. But we had no shortage of food. We and that was the most important thing. And I remember then also that was near the Romanian border where we were in a place, and my grandmother heard that she had a son in the 8th Army in Israel, in Palestine. He went to Palestine in 1937 or 38, and he joined the army. And she thought that she will have information about him because, we were trying to pick up the threads wherever you could. And I remember traveling with her to Bucharest because this was a place where you could get information about her son and about her other children. So I went, she took me, and I remember the journey, and what I remember of it, the trains, and how we traveled. Such primitive way in the wagons, and it was a terrible journey. But we got there, and we came back without good information. Without. Yeah,
when is
this? That was in 1945, towards the end of 1945. All the information that we got, we heard about Auschwitz, and she couldn't hear from her son. She couldn't get any. Apparently, he was in the ship that was bombed in Benghazi, and he sank. So she lost. My grandmother lost 5 children during the war, in the gas chambers, in the army, and in Benghazi. My mother and another uncle stayed alive.
So for the period between when you left Budapest and went to the provinces, but that period between then and between the war sort of ending generally around the sort of later on in the summer, what were those? How was your life in those months? You had more food.
We had more food, and things started to normalize, go back to normal. But I don't think you can call it normal. Those wounds and whatever has been inflicted, they are there forever.
What happened? What did you do next?
Well, I went to school. I was a young girl. I went to school, and then eventually went back to my parents to Budapest. I remember they were waiting for us in the train station. And I went home and started a new life.
In Buda?
In Pest. At that time we went to Pest. We stayed with my grandparents. And actually went back to the old place on that where we were. And then we went back to Buda, eventually went back to Buda and tried again in Buda. But it was not the same anymore. So we moved back to Pest.
So backwards and forwards.
Yeah, backwards and forwards, yes.
In what way did it not feel the same?
It was very difficult to re-establish yourself. First of all, we wanted to go back to our flat in Budapest, where what we had, and we couldn't get it back. And all our belongings were scattered away. It was taken away by the neighbors, and they never gave it back to us. And we felt the hatred, and we felt that people used to say, "Oh, more Jews came back came back, then went away." And actually my mother was saying this, that she overheard from the concierge who lived below us. She said that more Jews came back, then went away, and they should have really cut their flesh while they are alive. So this is the kind of atmosphere we used to live. So it wasn't very pleasant. And we were thinking, my parents were thinking of starting a new life abroad, but they never sort of tried until things became very bad in Hungary, in Budapest. In 1951, we finally emigrated to Israel.
So you stayed there while the communism was establishing itself in...
Yes, slowly. Yeah, well, in the beginning there was no communism. I think it's only became stronger in 1948. Up until then, business was good, and my father and my mother they created a new business, and we went to school, so we had a relatively normal life, if you can call it normal. But then in 1948, when in the Warsaw Pact or whatever it happened, Hungary was taken over by the Soviet Union, more or less, and life became very, very difficult, and everything was rationed, like food and clothes. You couldn't buy anything, and you couldn't have you didn't have money. You had nothing. So this is when my father started to earn money with his chazanut. He got a job as a chazan, but we couldn't very well make a good living out of it. It was very poorly paid, but it was something. So in order to be able to finish the month, my mother always had to sell something. And this is how it went. And my grandparents and my uncle went on Aliyah to Israel. And we stayed, I don't know why, but we stayed in Hungary. I was involved in the Akiva. And my brother, he was much younger than me. And of course, the thought of going to Israel and Eretz Israel, it was very, very important for us, especially my father, not so much. He wanted to go more to America because he thought that with his chazanas, he would be able to make a better living. But I was very happy to go to Israel because my Jewish identity grows so much over whatever happened, and Palestine and was such a holy word, was such a holy thing. And when it became Israel, of course, it was much more. And I personally wanted very much to go to Israel. And we were lucky in a way because there was an agreement between the Hungarian government and the Israeli government that 3,000 people can go on Aliyah, 3,000 families, those who have parents or brothers and sisters. And my grandparents already were in Israel. They went on Aliyah in 1946. So they sent us the visa, and we wrote our names on it. But it was difficult to get out of Hungary. You could only run away if you could, and many people were caught. My husband, he ran, but I mean, it's a big risk you had to take because he could kill you in the border, or they could put you into prison, so we stayed and waited for our turn to go. In the beginning, these aliyot, they went quite every month. There was an aliyah to Israel, about few hundred families. But then towards the 1949-50, it slowed down, and it was very, very slow. So every 6 months only went one. So by the time our turn came, it was 1951, June 1951. They didn't let anyone out. We were very lucky to get out. After us, there was one more, or maybe two more aliyot. That's all. And this is when we got to Israel in 1951. Yeah.
And where did you go to in Israel?
My grandmother had a flat in Israel, which she just got, a very tiny flat near Haifa. And of course we went to her straight away, and we stayed there for a while until my parents tried to establish themselves. But we stayed there for quite some time with my grandparents. And my uncle got married meanwhile, and his wife also lived there in the neighborhood. It was near Haifa.
And you had your youngest brother had been born by this time.
My youngest brother was born in 1946 in October. Simchat Torah it was when he was born.
So that had been your family had been in
Budapest still.
Budapest
Yeah, he was born in Budapest still, yeah.
Tell me something about your time in Israel.
My time in Israel, well, it was also not an easy time, unfortunately, because it was very hard for my parents to settle down. They didn't speak the language. And my father thought that he will be able to make a living with his Hazanot, which was very difficult because in Israel there are a lot of people who know the Ivrit, and he've got nice voice, and it's a different life. And it was the time of the Tzena where everything was Russian. It was very hard times. So he couldn't really very well make a living very easily. I was working, occasional work, so I was 15 when I went. I didn't go to school anymore at that time. And I was working in a hairdressing salon, actually. And my father was looking for a job, and finally he found something near Tel Aviv, so they moved over to Tel Aviv, near Tel Aviv, in Lod, actually, they lived. He found a sister who came back from the war as well. She was in Auschwitz, my auntie, and then in Bergen-Belsen. And she went to Sweden after the war. And from Sweden she made Aliyah, and she came to Israel. So we met there, and they were already there. She was already there. She got married for the second time because her husband perished in the war, unfortunately. So and they had a flat in Lod, so my parents moved over to Lod, and I stayed with my grandparents for a while. But later I volunteered to go to the Israeli army, and I was in the army when I was 17. Because I just could see no way I will be able to integrate properly, learn the language. And that was the best part of my life, I think, to being in the Israeli army.
In what way?
Well, at first I think I found myself. I was with people in my age. I was and very nice people, and I learned the language, and I